This episode is brought to you by Ursa Minor Outfitters. Folks, I'm absolutely in love with my loon mug. It's handmade, it's an absolute piece of art. Whether it's at the office or at the house, people keep asking to check it out. If you're not a loon fan, they also have other beautiful mugs for wildlife fans of moose, bears, and eagles. They specialize in products highlighting the outdoors and local pride through quality design by local artists. They've even started expanding into items beyond mugs, like apparel, dog accessories, and soon candles and more. They also try to partner and highlight other small businesses, and in some cases, forego profits in lieu of charitable giving to help their community, such as the dog rescue. So check them out, UrsaMinorOutfitters.com, and enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. And for our four-legged hiking partners, they also have a portable silicone dog bowl and also a sweet over-the-collar dog bandana. Go check them out, UrsaMinorOutfitters.com, and don't forget to enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. Welcome, everyone, to the latest episode of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I'm your host, Ivan, and I'm excited to share this new season of the podcast with you. With both fall and winter arriving in the Pacific Northwest, it's time to store the mobile recording studio. This season, we'll be switching things up and interviewing some of my favorite hikers that I follow on Instagram virtually. We're following a similar format to season 1, where the first part of the episode focuses on the guest and their hiking adventures, and we're still going to end each episode with a speed round of this or that questions, all related to hiking. Today's episode features our first international guest. We cross the Atlantic and visit with Chloe from the UK. You can follow her on Instagram at Fables and Fells. We talked to Chloe about the amazing Lake District National Park, her wild camping and wild swimming adventures, and what it's like hiking with her adorable dog Cam. Without further ado, let's jump into our episode with Chloe. Welcome, everyone, to the latest episode of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I'm really excited today to be with this guest, as she is the first international guest we've had on the podcast. It's Chloe from Lake District. Thank you, Chloe, for joining us on the podcast today. I'm really excited to learn about what hiking is in your neck of the woods and how it's a little bit different, and just what is hiking in the UK. But for listeners that don't follow you, could you share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. And thanks so much for having me on. And it's, like I said, it's an honor to be your first international guest. Yeah, so I've been hiking really as long as I can remember. I got started pretty early on. My dad would take me, sort of family trips. We'd go up to Snowdonia National Park in Wales and go camping and, doing the peaks up there. I did Snowdon pretty early on. I think I might have even been in single figures when I did Cribgoch, the knife edge route up Snowdon. And then we did Ben Nevis, which is the highest mountain in, all of the UK, including, and it's up in Scotland. I think I did that around 14. And then just all throughout my teens, I did a lot of hiking, some multi-day trips and things like that. And then when I went to college, I did adventurous leadership. So I worked briefly as an outdoor instructor, but due to health reasons, I can sort of continue with that, unfortunately. So I had to kind of find a different path back to the outdoors. But yes, I've always loved hiking and being in the mountains.
Oh, that's great. So that tallest peak in the UK, do you know how many meters that is?
Yeah, so it's nothing compared to US peaks. But Ben Nevis is 1,345 meters. So that's around 4,500 feet.
Hey, still a good size.
Yes, especially up in Scotland, you get a lot of snow on it, often all throughout the spring and things like that as well. So it's definitely the coldest I've ever been in Scotland on a Scottish winter. I've been up to the top of Norway inside the Arctic Circle. You definitely feel the cold more in Scotland, I feel, just because it's just such a wet cold. It's very, everything's very damp and it just really sort of seeps into your bones.
I can feel that. It's kind of like the west side of Washington. It's a bit of a rainforest, so it gets a ton of rain.
Yeah, I've been up to like Portland and Seattle, and it has a sort of a similar feel.
And when they get a cold snap, it definitely definitely just sinks into your bones, and it's kind of hard to shake without like a hot cocoa or hot chocolate to warm you up.
Yeah, definitely.
For where you're at now, what would you consider your home base for your hiking adventures to be? And can you share a little bit about what it's like to hike in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, so 2 years ago, we moved up to sort of the edge of the Lake District. So the Lake District is England's largest national park. It's a World Heritage Site. It's just over 900 square miles. And like I said, it's nothing on the scale that you have in the US, but it really has, I feel like, a really special feel to it. And I know you're a Tolkien fan, and for me, much of it has a very kind of Middle-earth sort of feel. The colours, just the sort of the shapes and the rock formations. And yeah, it's really beautiful. As the name suggests, there are a heck of a lot of water all over the Lake District. So it's got a very sort of quintessential English feel as well, with the little villages dotted about. We're sort of on the border, so we're not within the national park, but we're a stone's throw kind of away from it. And we moved up here so that we could have access to that. I grew up in the southwest, close to Dartmoor National Park, which again has a completely different feel to it. And it's not mountainous, but it's very kind of hilly. But yeah, the Lake District is sort of England's sort of mountain region.
And, after seeing your videos and photos of the national park, it quickly shot up onto my list of hiking destinations. Just like you said, it looks like something out of Middle-earth. And I mean, it has, like you said, the bodies of water, the lakes, but it also has mountains. You've shared videos of doing some cave exploration, forests, boulders, and I think even some monoliths and structures from a long, long time ago. It's actually a pretty massive national park. For the U.S. listeners, it's 3 times the size of Mount Rainier National Park. I think Mount Rainier is a little over 300 square miles, and I think the Lake District is a little over 900.
Yes, 912, I think.
I mean, it looks like each section has its own unique landscape. Have you had a chance to explore a good portion of the park? And do you have a favorite section of the park?
Yes. So what I've been working on is the Wainwrights. And if anyone doesn't know, probably US listeners wouldn't know, there are 214 Wainwright peaks, as sort of documented by Alfred Wainwright. He wrote a set of pictorial guides to the Lake District, and all of the books are handwritten, and all of his illustrations just incredibly detailed. And it was kind of his life's work, just spent, just wandering every possible kind of path and things in the Lake District, up in the Fowls. He spent much of his life just, documenting the Lakeland Fowls, and there are kind of 7 different areas to it. It's sort of northern, eastern, far eastern, that kind of thing. And yeah, there's 214 Wainwright peaks in total, and we've completed 2 full sections, which is the eastern and the far eastern, and we're starting to kind of work our way around now up into the northern. And we sort of have to go, it's kind of a big sort of almost ring road to get over to the west side. So that's going to be sort of the next stage. And I think we'll probably complete them next year.
So here in the United States, there's a couple big trails that are through hikes. Is there a trail that kind of goes north and south where you can just trek the whole national park, or even east to west?
Well, there is the Cumbria Way, which you can kind of work your way through the Lake District. And then there's also coast to coast as well that you can do. And there's something called the Bob Graham, where it's kind of it's an Uber ultra marathon, really, which I don't think I'll be doing. My husband Ryan is looking at doing that at some point. He's done an ultra marathon within the lakes. But yeah, I think I do a bit of fell running, but I think mainly I'll stick to the walking.
And out of all the sections that you've had a chance to explore, do you have a favorite section of the park?
Yeah, it's quite hard. They are quite different. So you've got the area where you've got your biggest. So you've got Scafell Pike is England's biggest mountain, and that's at just under 1,000 meters, I think 978 meters, which is just over 3,000 feet. And then around that, you've got Great Gable, which is probably my favorite fell. It's just really imposing. It's very rocky. You can just kind of see it, and it really stands out from sort of wherever you are. That sort of area of the lakes is really interesting. But I really quite like the eastern and far eastern because they're very quiet. A lot of people will go to the sort of key peaks people do is Scafell Pike, Helvellyn, maybe like Blencathra, Skiddaw and Catbows. Unless you're sort of doing the Wainwrights, there's not a lot of people in the sort of far eastern. And again, sort of harking back to the whole Tolkien, it's more of a like grassy plateaus, and it's not as kind of spectacular and sort of mountain shaped as you might have in more the sort of central fells. But yeah, just if you want to get out of the way of everyone and just sort of walk through these sort of high plateaus is really beautiful.
Good to know, because that's one thing I did notice on your videos is some of the hikes that you were going on, you hardly came across crowds, or there was the occasional hiker and camper, but there wasn't the large crowds that you tend to see at some of the more popular national parks.
No, so I'm very strategic about that as well. So in, again, sort of being England's largest national park, it does get a lot of traffic, and especially with COVID, obviously people weren't going abroad for holidays, so everyone was sort of piling into the Lake District. And the roads, the sort of infrastructure is not really sort of there to sort of facilitate that. You've got really narrow little country roads and lanes, and so like I sort of mentioned, people kind of probably through Instagram and things like that will kind of have these sort of hotspots that they'll see and want to go to. And like in the middle of summer, it'll look like ants going up Scarfell Pike because everyone wants to go and do the highest, right? Yeah. There's sort of an easy track up it that's fairly straightforward, not a whole lot of navigation required. And there'll just be this sort of trail of ants. And we've kind of been up there and done Scarfell Pike. Well, there's a sort of a neighbouring peak called Scarfell, which sort of, there's just sort of a shoulder between it. And there'll be no one on our route, but you can see, because everyone's sort of going up the sort of really tried and trodden path, but there are lots of different scramble routes up things. Yeah, there's just a lot of different interesting routes. So you could literally be on a neighbouring peak and not see a single person. And it might only be a couple meters, a few meters, shorter than the main peak, but you'll just get that sort of solitude experience while you're walking. And that's really what I look for when I go out walking. I definitely don't want to be within crowds of people, and timing as well. In summer I'll get up at 4:00 in the morning and go out and do a walk, and you get that then you get that experience of just being out there sort of by yourself.
Those are good tips. And I think the same thing happened in the United States with COVID, that the national parks that had a huge surge in people visiting, and a lot of them started implementing not necessarily a lottery system, but a permitting system where you had to apply for a permit in order to do some of the more popular hikes. Is that something that the Lake District has implemented, or not yet?
No, not at all. It's very much if you can get parked, you can go and walk. Okay. But the big trouble that you then have with that is people start parking in areas that are not appropriate to be parked in. There's farmers that are actively working, and you start getting people sort of getting in the way of that and parking over sort of gateways and just sort of cramming in all over. So you do definitely have to be mindful when you're coming to an area that is such a small scale, with car parks and things. And the thing about the national parks, here in the UK, I don't know how it is for you. You've obviously got a lot more sort of space, but we just don't have mega car parks and things to, facilitate. So it is a case of, you have to pick a good time to come out and do it. And if you can't get parked, then you've got to have a plan B and go somewhere else, because it does get crowded in kind of peak season. And we kind of touched on it a little bit. We have places in national parks here in the United States that have historical artifacts or petroglyphs from indigenous communities that live there. But in the Lake District, you've shown some really unique, not just monoliths, but structures from, I think one you even mentioned was like over 4,000 years old. Are those kind of just scattered throughout the national park? You can just see history all over and all different ages. You'll have, for example, the Langdale axe industry. That was the one you were talking about being around 3,500 to 4,000 years old. So Neolithic. And that was basically, they would mine the greenstone up high up in the Langdale pikes and then take that away, and that would be made into axes and then distributed all over Great Britain. And you can kind of go up and there'll be kind of remnants and debris from all of that. So it's not like a specific penned off sort of site. It's just you might kind of come across just seeing the sort of the remnants of that. And so obviously from Neolithic, then you come into just all kinds of different history, really. You've got a lot of Roman history. Yeah, there's High Street, which is one of the fells. It's a sort of a big flat fell, and instead of walking down through the valleys, they would walk up over the top of High Street. So you can just kind of go up there and just imagine this Roman legion kind of trompsing its way across this really high sort of plateau. And then you've obviously got your more sort of recent history. You'll have really kind of oldie worldy pubs and things like that are still sort of running. But yeah, it's got all kinds of history.
Oh, that's great. That even adds more to the allure of visiting the Lake District National Park.
Yeah, definitely. It's a big interest for me. Yeah, it just adds another layer to it as you're kind of hiking about and knowing that, oh, that's that, and that's Roman and all those kind of things.
Another thing that I found interesting about that national park, Chloe, is I feel like a lot of the national parks, at least here in the United States, especially with the rise in Instagram, is everyone wants that shot where there's no clouds, it's a beautiful sunny day. But for me, at least through the photos and videos that I've seen, I think it looks beautiful on a nice sunny day, but it absolutely is stunning on a cloudy and moody day. For my preference, I think I would like to see it in that kind of weather system. As someone that's seen all sorts of weather there, do you have a preference?
Yes, absolutely. I think if you look at my feed, you'll see that I definitely don't favor a really bright sunny day. I really like the sort of moody weather. And I think that adds to the whole experience of it. You can get these really atmospheric days and all the kind of cloud formations. So at this sort of time of year, kind of as it sort of, we kind of moved into the autumn and you'd get these sort of cloud inversions where you'd have all the sort of the cloud and the fog sort of settle in the valley. And then you can kind of be above that and sort of looking down on it. Yeah, and definitely sort of days like that are incredible. And I much prefer to get shots of all these sort of clouds rolling through and things like that. It adds so much more, I think, to the sort of adventure for that day when you've got all these sort of different weather systems happening rather than just a bright sunny day.
It's funny to say, but it makes it more like cinematic, more movie-esque. Like when it's in that cloudy, moody day, I could see the Fellowship of the Ring coming down some of those hills that you've shown.
Yeah, absolutely. It feels like that.
Kind of switching gears, we do a deep dive into our guests' Instagram or social media. And one thing that I noticed is that your very first post was when you visited the Himalayas. Can you share a little bit about that trip and how it was trekking in Nepal?
Wow, yeah, that was a good few years ago now. Sort of, as I mentioned early on, my dad sort of took me kind of hiking. My mum's really into nature as well, so they've both been a big influence. But my dad particularly had been trekking in the Himalayas. He'd done the Annapurna circuit many, many years ago, and that was always a massive inspiration for me. Like the Himalayas, I just saw that as just the sort of epitome of mountains and adventure and everything. So I really had to go there myself. So I was out there for about a month, and I just went out by myself. I did meet up with kind of a group, but I largely just sort of went and kind of did my own kind of bits and bobs. And I went climbing. I did some canyoning, some caving. I went in Siddha Cave, which I think is one of the largest in Asia. And that was incredible. Then also, obviously, the actual trekking portion. And I stayed in tea houses, which are, it's just a really special experience. For me, it was very, I think I've mentioned it before on one of the videos, it was quite an emotional experience to see the Himalayas for the first time. Obviously, when you fly into Kathmandu, you see them, but then I went on a really tiny plane. I think it was 2 people wide, and just sort of being in amongst, the Himalayas with them all around you. It was just incredible. And then obviously when you're trekking, there was one corner that I walked around and suddenly, wow, there's Annapurna. It's just, it's really special.
Wow. And how long would you say it kind of took you to get adjusted to the elevation when you first got there?
I didn't have an issue with it at all. I know I was with a couple people from the Netherlands, which is a very flat land, and I think they felt it a little bit more than I did. I didn't go particularly high. I didn't do like a big base camp. I had wanted to do Everest Base Camp or Annapurna Base Camp, but I was on sort of a specific trek, and by the end of that, my legs were a bit shot, so I didn't carry on and do more. I'd have had to just sort of organise it there and then and things like that as well. But which I slightly regret. But I thought, wow, I can always come back and do that. So for me, it wasn't an issue. But I haven't been at a really high altitude that where I would actually feel probably more of the effects.
You kind of mentioned a little bit earlier earlier on that you made it out to Portland and the Pacific Northwest. Outside of the Himalayas, has there been another country or region that you enjoyed trekking or exploring?
Seattle and Portland were both business trips, so unfortunately I didn't do any trekking, but I would definitely like to come back to the US and do some actual kind of walking trips. I think as well as the mountains, I'd also like to go through more of the kind of desert scape. I think it just looks absolutely incredible where you've got, the rock formations and the cactuses, and I think that looks like such an amazing adventure. That's definitely high on the list. I did a bit of a trek in Morocco.
Oh, wow.
On kind of in through the sand dunes, which again, completely different to obviously being in the mountains. I think I went in thinking, okay, there's going to be sand dunes, but there was so much more than that. You had these sort of exposed seabeds and this big sort of wall, kind of cliff, and you had these really kind of old villages that were no longer used. So you had all the remnants of that, and it was so much more varied than I could imagine, really. And going up the sort of largest sand dune, which I think was Shabi, I'm probably butchering that, but yeah, it was just a completely different feel to it all.
With hiking those sand dunes, there's a random sand dune in the middle of Washington state and these basalt cliffs. And I don't know what the height is, but it took me about 15-20 minutes to summit this sand dune just because it's not stable. You're constantly sinking as you get higher. Did you find it difficult hiking through the sand dunes and kind of climbing up them?
Yeah, so obviously it feels like you take one step up and you go about 5 backwards. And that's very much the way of walking through sand uphill. So you definitely kind of just sink back constantly. So it is a bit of a trek to get up to the top, but not too bad at all. And obviously once you're up there, it's pretty easy getting back down, a lot nicer than walking down through the mountains. So yeah, that's definitely something I would go back and do. I think often people like to always do something new, but I think sometimes when you go back and do something, you can just sort of take it in more on that kind of deeper level and kind of experience it more fully. So yeah, that's something I'd definitely do again.
Awesome. Yeah, I've kind of been noticing that too since I moved back to Washington State and revisited a couple of my old hikes. You kind of learn to get a new appreciation, or you start noticing things that you might have not noticed the last time you visited. It's a really kind of exciting experience to see a place in a new light. Outside of hiking, you also do some backpacking and camping trips, some rock climbing, but the one that I found the most interesting is wild swimming in cold water. And I'm literally and figuratively dipping my toes in that activity. Can you share with us how you kind of got into swimming in cold water lakes, and any tips for me and the listeners on how to safely approach wild swimming?
I've always absolutely loved swimming, and it feels completely different being in a natural environment as opposed to being obviously in a swimming pool. And it just feels, for me, like most at home in the water. And you come out of it feeling so just renewed. It is really such a reset kind of when you go in. I think it's that full immersion, obviously. You're kind of putting your body fully into the natural environment and kind of embracing it in all of that coldness, as opposed to, I think I mentioned this on one of my videos, rather than, we go out there in the mountains and we've got big puffer jackets on and our gloves and hats, and you're creating that barrier, obviously necessary with the elements, but when you go wild swimming, you're just embracing it. And that's what I love about it. In terms of the cold water side of things, it's just getting started in summer. That's probably the best way to do it, just sort of getting yourself a little bit acclimatized to it, and then when you get out, obviously you've got the sun that can just help things along. But yeah, it's sort of a slow process. I haven't done a lot in really, really cold water. I've done a few sort of break a frozen lake and get into it. But I think it's something to build up on. And I think there's a lot to doing it safely. Obviously, it's a big danger, that sort of cold water shock, where people probably, if you jump in, you may be more like prone to that because you've got that sort of initial kind of shock factor. Whereas I like to sort of slowly work my way into the water. It's all about breathing. And And I think if you look into Wim Hof, I think everyone knows him as the cold water guy, and there's sort of breathing techniques and things like that involved. But for me, yeah, when I get in, I feel like I can just be in there for hours and not get out. It's kind of a weird feeling because I don't do well walking about in the cold and like getting cold hands, but actually in the water, it's a little bit different. Obviously, if you were doing it in the absolute depths of winter, you wouldn't be in for very long. It'd be a good idea to have a jet boil and take a hot water bottle with you and fill that up, and all those kind of things, just to make sure that you can really get nice and warm afterwards. And obviously going with other people, that's always a lot safer. Having a tow float, all those kind of things.
I kind of got into it on a trip this summer or late summer to Colorado, where there was hot springs kind of resort next to a mountain-fed river. And what they would do is you would have access to different temperatures inside the pool, but then they would have a little walled off section of the river where you could dunk yourself in there. And I think the river was like 46 degrees Fahrenheit compared to, you were coming out of 100-degree water. And I preferred the cold water because coming out of it, like you said, you almost feel renewed. Like I felt like my brain was buzzing, like almost like if I had a strong coffee. And right now, me and a group of friends, we do a 30-day fitness challenge once or twice a year. And the motivation isn't really, prizes. It's more, I guess it's a bit of a punishment, but the losers of this fitness challenge for this winter challenge that we're doing, they have to go into one of our local bodies of water for either 1 or 2 minutes. So I've been slowly kind of getting myself acclimatized if I do end up in the bottom two to kind of...
Yeah, I think for some people that's a reward, getting into cold water. I think once you've integrated that into your life, you do look forward to it. Like I said, I'm still kind of working my way towards cold water. I've done it a little bit. I certainly don't do it like on a daily or even weekly basis, but it is something that I would like to do a lot more of on that really regular basis.
Like a great experience on that video that you posted on YouTube.
Yeah, and I think if you have any aches and pains and things like that, it can really help. And like you mentioned with the hot and the cold water, I did that in Greece, where they have the hot springs and then you get into the sea. And I was the same. I really thought going into it, I would really love being in the hot springs and that would just feel so lovely and amazing. But almost if it's like a bit too hot, it's almost nicer to be on the cool side. And you just get that feeling of feeling so refreshed once you come back out of the sea or the cold water.
Definitely. Oh, I'll have to look that up because, that would be a different experience going into a sea as opposed to a lake or a river.
Yeah, I think sometimes the sort of the movement of the sea and the salt water, obviously that's a whole different element that it kind of adds to it. But up here we have, they're called tarns, and it comes from an old Norse word. And there's a lot of the names and of things up here are kind of Norse, come from Norse and Old English, obviously. But yeah, we have these they're basically sort of pools of water up high in the fells, and that's sort of something you can do up here is obviously do your hike, but then get into one of these tarns. And sometimes it's like a bit of you can get a view where it feels a little bit like an infinity pool because you're sort of sat in there and you're high up and just overlooking this vast view. That's a really nice sort of start or end of a walk. And especially if you've been wild camping as well, it's nice to have a bit of a refresh.
Yeah, and kind of using that as the segue. Some of the people that I've talked to, there's some hikers that have either a summit ritual or an end of the hike routine. Maybe it's like a favorite snack or a meal, possibly some trail beverages, or even, jumping into a lake. Do you have a regular custom that you do when you reach your destination, or maybe once you make it back out?
With doing the Wainwrights, the kind of thing that you do is you sort of boop the top of, they're called cairns. So you'll have this it'll either be like a pile of rocks or it will be an actual formed little obelisk, and you'll just sort of touch the top of that. And sometimes, if you look through all the Wainwright's work, he'll say where the specific Wainwright peak is, and it's not necessarily the highest point. It usually is, but sometimes it's a little area off to it where he thinks has got the best view, or that kind of thing. So, but yeah, it's always once we get to the top, we always touch the top of it and then move on.
I like that. That's great. First, I want to say that that you showed one of the coziest camping setups in your solo wild camp video. A couple of my guests that do backpacking trips, with speaking to them, I haven't really done any backpacking trips. I'm mostly a day hiker. I've camped, but you normally drive up to your campsite and camp overnight. And I feel like I'm going to have to borrow some of your setup from that video. But when it comes to your pack list, what would you consider your most valuable piece of hiking or camping gear? And then what's your favorite item of convenience for overnight trips?
Well, I think the most valuable piece probably has to be my roll mat, which I've got a Thermarest. It's the NeoAir X-Lite. So it packs up really tiny. It's super tiny and lightweight, which obviously is kind of what you want when you're taking, various gear with you. And I've got a dog as well, so I have to take all this dog gear with me as well. So that definitely helps. But I think that's probably the most valuable because you need to be off the cold ground. And I think that's the thing. You could probably get away in some instances without the actual shelter of the tent. You could get into a cave or something like that. But I think, the roll mat to get yourself off that cold ground is probably my most valuable. And then for the sort of convenience or luxury item, you probably saw my little candle that I take with me, my electric candle. I like to kind of have a little bit of a nice cozy scene when I am camping. And especially if you're doing it in winter, it's such a long time to spend in a tent and you just want to make it nice. So I take that with me. It's super tiny. I've also got a little lantern now, which I'm going to take on my next trip. But always I think it's got to be I always take a little bag of sachets of like hot chocolates and nice coffees and things like that. And I think that just adds a little bit of morale to it all.
One of the things I think I'm going to steal from you, Chloe, is the little candlelight, because that was a nice touch.
Otherwise, you've got that sort of harsh head torch, haven't you? It's so bright and it's just excessive. But just having that nice little bit of light, and you can kind of sit in there and hear the sort of wind or rain or whatever around you, and it adds to it, I feel.
Definitely. Instead of that bright, light that's coming from your headlamp or from the lantern, it's a nice little touch. Now, on the flip side, has there been a piece of gear that you thought, was going to be a game changer for your hiking and camping experience, but it didn't end up living up to its expectations?
For me, probably, I love a good research session. So before I buy any kit, I really look into it all. And so I've been very intentional about most, if not all, of my kit. But I'd probably say, and this is no shade to mountain equipment, I love mountain equipment, and they are gloves. So I got the guide gloves, and I'm sure they're great for most people. But for me and my little twiglet fingers, they cannot stay warm, separated into a glove. And I remember I did the Scottish winter mountaineering, and I took those gloves with me thinking, these are going to do the job. And for me, they just did not. And obviously there's more factors involved. Wristlets are going to help. And obviously I had all my layers and things like that. But for me, it's you've got to keep the hands warm. Once your hands go down, the rest of you goes down, because obviously you need that to navigate and to, just do everything you need to do. And my hands were freezing. And luckily there was a girl there, Nikki, and she very kindly said, here, I've got these mittens, put these on. And they were a game changer. So that's definitely something I've learned, that I do not do well in gloves. I need mittens, or at least need. So now I have a thin glove, well, sort of a medium glove from Rab. You can do everything with them that you need to do, all your zips and stuff like that. They're very sort of slim fitting on the fingers, so you can do everything you need to do. But then I have mittens over the top of that, and just kind of having that overlayer helps massively. Or if I need to warm my hands up, or if I don't really need to use my hands, I'll just put them in mittens, because having all your fingers together, they actually stay warm then. So that was quite a harsh learning curve, but now I know.
Oh, and I've had a similar experience. I do snowboarding on the winter months, and for the longest time I did the finger gloves. And just like you said, once they get cold, even if I stuff 2 or 3 hand warmers in there, it's hard to bring them back. And this last last season was the first time that I tried out mittens. And similar to you, I have like a thin glove underneath. Then having that mitten just adds, like you said, keeping your fingers together, I think definitely keeps your hand warm. And last year I didn't have any issues with it. And I never was a fan of mittens because I kind of thought that I needed all my fingers to get off the ski lifts and stuff. But, once I tried them on, mittens are the way to go for me.
Definitely. And you can get sort of gloves that have like a mitten attachment over the top, so you can kind of peel them back and then kind of pop them back over. Definitely, if anyone gets cold hands, mittens are definitely the way forward.
Now, throughout all your hikes and travels, Chloe, has there been any close calls, whether it's getting lost or maybe you had an unexpected wildlife encounter, maybe Mother Nature threw you a curveball and caught you by surprise, or just had some weird run-ins? Have you had any of those experiences?
Well, again, very different over here. We don't have any wildlife that you're going to encounter that's going to cause you an issue, unless it's maybe a cow, which not obviously not wildlife, but walking through the fields. Nothing crazy really. I think if you are prepared, then it never sort of goes too disastrous. We take out like a group shelter and things like that, and if it's absolutely chucking it down and it's freezing and you just want to whip that over when you have your lunch, have a little stop. There's kind of things you can do to sort of mediate these really miserable times. But probably, I think when we started out doing the Wainwrights, because we were traveling up from the southwest, which was about 350 miles or so up to the Lake District, we would try and cram in as many Wainwrights as possible. And that's probably been the time that things have probably not been as ideal as they could have been. Just sort of maybe biting off a tad more than I can chew. We had a few days that were sort of 10 Wainwright days, so like 10 peaks. Obviously you're doing a lot of miles. And those, we had a couple of days and they were like doing the biggest one. So you Scarfell Pike, Great Gable, really sort of rocky and steep, just kind of cramming in those multiple peaks and probably not having quite enough food. So I think for me, that would be it, when you just slightly bite off a little bit more than you need to chew. And if you would just reduce that, you would have probably had, a slightly more enjoyable experience. But again, like anything like that, you learn from it and you look back on it and it is a good experience. But sometimes I think with the lakes, with it being so boggy, I have ended up sort of waist deep in mud on a couple of occasions where my foot has just gone completely through something.
Oh, wow. And then in those instances, do you have to take off your boot and kind of dig it out, or are you able to pull your foot and boot out at the same time?
No, I've just luckily just been able to. Yeah, it was only one leg, I think, was the worst one. So I mean, obviously it can be dangerous. You do have to look out for, in sort of boggy areas, there'll be a lot of cotton grass, and obviously you don't want to walk straight over the top of all of that. But as the name suggests, the Lake District gets very wet, and some of the areas are boggier than others. Some of the fells would just be very rocky, and you've got rock paths all the way. That's absolutely fine. But like the sort of more far eastern, where it's grassy and boggy, and you might occasionally get a bit of a footfall. But always with that, I take sort of waterproof trousers, gaiters, and that protects pretty much everything. So you get away fairly unscathed.
Okay, I'll have to think about getting some gaiters, because that's a good tip to be wearing in those instances.
Oh, definitely. Even just if it's going to be just a bit of a muddy day or just wet, it just protects your boots so much, and your sort of your ankles and all the rest of it, and that sort of top section of the boot, obviously, that's exposed. So yeah, definitely helps to keep things a lot drier.
And is that something that you've been using for a while, Chloe? Because at least for me, this last year has been, I guess, the first time where I'm seeing them more and more on hikers, where maybe 10 years ago it would be maybe one or two, but now I feel like it's something that a lot of hikers are starting to use, especially on the muddy hikes.
No, they've been around for a long time. I had them when I was sort of doing some multi-days when I was probably like 14, which was quite a long time ago now. Yeah, they're definitely, maybe more in England. I think they've got better in design, like the ones I used to wear. How would I describe them? Not baggy as such, but just a lot more sort of material going on. But now you get them and they're really streamlined. They're almost a bit more like, like riding chaps.
Oh, okay.
And they're very snug fitting. And so, yeah, I much prefer them now than when I started out.
Okay, yeah. I'll have to look into some of those. You kind of mentioned some of the wildlife that you do encounter. Cows, cows, and I've seen, the herds of sheep that you've come across. But the one that kind of stood out that I didn't really think of when I think of the UK, I didn't think of snakes, and especially in an area that's kind of colder and wetter. But you came across a snake on one of your treks, right?
Yes, that was really amazing to see. I just didn't, like you said, you don't quite expect it when you're just walking around in this country. I've seen them before, like grass snakes and things like that. But yeah, this was actually an adder, so venomous, but they are very reclusive usually, and they're getting rarer. The UK is not the best place really for wildlife, unfortunately. Obviously, there's a lot of movement to try and rewild things and add more actual wildlife habitat, because on the face of it, it's very green. It's a very green country, but so much of it is agricultural. So yeah, that space for wildlife, like many countries, has diminished a lot. And so yeah, it was really special to just come across that on the path, having a little bit of a sunbathe. I think it was quite a young adder as well, but really beautiful. But yeah, it's not, if you come over here, don't be worried and expecting to see a venomous snake because you're very lucky if you actually do get to see one. And that was in more of a sort of kind of a heathland area. You're probably less likely to see them actually up in the fells.
Continuing on our animal trend, you have an adorable four-legged partner that tags along on a lot of your hikes. Can you share a little bit about Cam and how it's been hiking with him?
Yeah, so we got specifically a Springer Spaniel because walking is the main thing that I do. It's and I thought it'd be great to have a dog to take along with me. That dog would get really great walks and they'd be a great companion. And that's definitely the case, though. Spaniels like to be off the lead.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you've seen them, but they're very much they're the ultimate hard target. They're constantly just zigzagging around, nose to the ground. And whereas obviously when you're going hiking, you're doing it in a quite linear fashion and you're sort of following a path. And, so there's definitely, I think a lot of people will see dogs on Instagram and think, oh, amazing, I'll get a dog and I'll be able to take it hiking. And it doesn't always work out like that. And there's a lot of dogs that are just not suited to being up in the mountains. Cam very much is. He's very athletic. He's very confident. He absolutely loves being outdoors. And he can do big days. And I've definitely had to build him up. Obviously, like his paw pads, that's a consideration to take, to start off slow or start off sort of shorter distances over rocky ground, because you do need to build those paw pads up and build the fitness and the muscles up. Yeah, it's been an interesting process. He does have to be on the lead largely in the actual national park because, as you mentioned, there are these Herdwick sheep that are just all over the place, and he's a bit of a rascal and he's got a very sort of high prey drive. So he does have to be kept on the lead because he's very interested when he sees them. So there's a lot of considerations with taking dogs hiking. But yeah, he absolutely thrives on it. And it is fun. Like when I do these sort of solo camping, I sort of say it's solo, but it's not really because it's with my dog. And, he adds so much just to the experience, really. No,
and he looks like he's having a blast on your videos and on your pictures.
He always is. Every moment of the day, he's a really happy dog.
Now, for first-time hikers or those interested in backpacking or wild camping, do you have any advice for those listeners so they can have a safe and rewarding experience?
Yeah, I just think just focus on what you want to do. I think there's a lot out there in terms of comparison or, seeing things on Instagram or, there's a lot of push, I think, with our society for pushing forward and doing more and more and more. Always got to do a peak, always got to get to a summit and things like that. I think it's more just about being outside and kind of being present. And you see it a lot in terms of, and obviously I do it myself. Now that I'm sort of filming some of the hikes, I've got my camera out and things like that. But often there's, especially on Instagram, there's so much like, oh, we'll get to a beauty spot, take a load of photos and then leave. And I think it's just about making sure that you're actually present in that and you're actually taking it in and disconnecting if you can and just sort of seeing the small things. And you don't always have to start off by going out and doing a mountain and getting to the summit. And I think sometimes people see that and maybe bite off more than they can chew, or on the reverse, it sort of puts them off because they feel like, oh, that's what they need to do. So just take it in really small steps and just build your confidence up, bit by bit. I think it's probably better to kind of build yourself up in that way rather than just sort of going all out thinking, oh, I need to go and do this big thing. And then, having all these things happen and then, you've had a bad experience. So yeah, just little steps if you're starting out, and just making sure that every little thing that you do builds your confidence and you feel like, it was a success.
Oh, great tip. Especially if it's your first time going out there, if you do end up biting more than you can chew, it's going to leave a bad taste in your mouth and you might not necessarily have the want to go back out. But like you said, if you start off slow and you're present in the experience, I think it can be a rewarding time for folks.
Definitely. I mean, you see a lot over here with mountain rescue. They're out all the time. And obviously in a lot of instances, someone might have had a medical emergency and they really do need that help. But so much of it is just people that have not been prepared, or they've bitten off more than they can chew. And so, yeah, I think you're better off if you are starting out, to know that, okay, this is a short little route. I'm going to test my navigation. You're not putting yourself into a situation where you're going to get sort of lost at the top of a mountain on in really bad weather, because that's not obviously fun for anyone.
So the last question before we go into this and that questions, Chloe, is do you have any hiking goals for, I guess, the next 23 days left in 2022, and then any upcoming goals for 2023?
Well, I think for the rest of this year, I think one of the next hikes that I'm going to do is called the Coaldale Horseshoe. Mm-hmm. That's a walk that I've been wanting to do for quite a while. It gets a good few Wainwright peaks in, and it's just a really nice circular sort of horseshoe route. So I've been really looking forward to that one, and I think with a winter landscape as well, it's going to look incredible. And then probably into next year is just finishing off the Wainwrights. Like I said, I've done 143 out of 214, so I think probably next year we might be able to tick them off. And again, it's not a race. We've been doing it for a while, mm-hmm. And we're not kind of doing those big 10 Wainwright days and get them all in. We're kind of going out there and doing a few, probably wild camp some of them. Yeah, and so just enjoying it. I do get a lot of people ask me, or not a lot of people, but what's next? Where are you going to go next? Mm-hmm. And I'm just enjoying the Lake District. We moved up here 2 years ago. One of those years was in lockdown. So yeah, I think just getting out and just getting to know an area, I think is just a really just a nice thing to do, just to get yourself really familiar and kind of learn as much as you can. There's a lot more historical things that I want to explore. There's a lot more videos that I want to shoot. So yeah, it'll probably be based in the Lake District, though maybe some plans to go skiing, because I've actually never been skiing before.
Okay.
So I think that would be really fun, and probably something that is better to do sooner than later.
Oh, that sounds like an exciting 2023, and I'm looking forward to seeing you cross off that last Wainwright on the list for 2023.
Yeah.
Well, that was it for the regular questions, Chloe. This next section is this or that questions. So I'm just going to ask you 2 examples, and you just choose the one that you prefer.
Perfect.
All right. So here we go. Ascending or descending?
Ascending.
Waterfalls or summits?
Summits.
Switchbacks or straight up?
Switchbacks, unless there's a scramble option.
Oh, okay. Trek poles or freehand?
I do have poles, but I think I prefer free.
And do you fill up before a hike, or do you fill up after?
Oh, both. Little and often.
I like that. And how about bushwhack or go around?
Go around.
Jump in or stay dry?
Oh, definitely stay dry if you can.
Sunsets or sunrises?
Sunrises.
Spring flowers or fall colors?
Fall colors.
And do you tag a hike or do you not tag a hike?
Tag it if it's a Wainwright.
I like it. That's it for the this and that questions, Chloe. The last little bit, I want to tell people to follow you on Instagram, but also that they should check out your amazing YouTube channel. Like I said, you have some beautifully edited videos. And for those that are Lord of the Rings fans, please check out her Wild Swim video. It's my favorite. But I'll include a link to the channel for listeners to subscribe and like. But outside of YouTube and Instagram, you also own and operate Calm Dog Games. Can you share a little bit bit about what Calm Dog Games is?
Oh, sure. So that's my small business that was inspired by my spaniel. It's just about giving mental stimulation and enrichment for dogs. So just sort of doing games for them. I do make some of the dog toys as well. So yeah, that was a path that I ended up taking just through getting my dog, really. And yeah, I try and integrate the lakes into it by going out and doing product photography where I can, out in the fells and things like that. So yeah, that's basically Cam's Instagram account. It's his own Instagram account, really.
And for U.S. listeners, are they able to order and do you ship to the United States?
Yes, I do. I do ship worldwide, and I think I might have a stockist or two in the US as well.
Oh, okay. I'll make sure to link the Instagram and the website on the show notes as well.
Oh, thank you so much.
Well, Chloe, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Hikes and Mics. It's been really great talking to you and learning about the Lake District and all your adventures. Really appreciate you coming on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. It's been so much fun to talk to you, and I really enjoyed it. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Chloe, for joining us on the latest episode of the Hikes and Mics podcast. Make sure to follow her on Instagram at Fables and Fells to check out all her recent hiking adventures in the Lake District, and on YouTube to see her beautifully shot and edited videos from inside the national park. If you have a four-legged hiking partner and not sure what to get them for the holidays, make sure to also check out Chloe's business, Calm Dog Games, for brain games, enrichment, and toys. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Hikes and Mics podcast. We'll be putting out new episodes every week through the fall and winter. Be sure to like and subscribe to not miss out on those. Also, be sure to follow us on Instagram at Hikes and Mics. Catch you on the next one. This episode's music was created by Ketsa. Follow him on Instagram at Ketsa Music. This episode is brought to you by FlipSockz. Whether you're on the trail, on the job, or in the yard, FlipSockz will keep Mother Nature out of your boots with their innovative nylon sleeve. You no longer need to worry about any annoying debris getting trapped in your boots during your hikes. Simply flip down the nylon sleeve over any boot to prevent Mother Nature from finding its way inside, keeping your feet comfortable all day long. To get your first pair, visit FlipSockz.com and enter promo code HikesMics10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. And for listeners who use the promo code at checkout, I'll be donating 100% of the Season 2 promo code proceeds to Big City Mountaineers, who provide transformative experiences through connections to nature that strengthen life skills and build community for youth and disinvested communities across the nation. So if you're tired of bits and pieces of the trail finding its way into your hiking boots, pick up a pair of FlipSockz today with the promo code HikesMics10 to get 10% off. For website and promo code, see the episode description.